After her accident, she dialed home. But her parents were already boarding a flight to Maldives. This might be the best story you'll hear today. Welcome back and enjoy the story. The first sound Audrey heard after waking from emergency surgery wasn't the hum of machines or the murmur of nurses in the Chicago General Hospital. It was her own ragged breath, uneven and shallow, echoing in a sterile room that smelled of antiseptic and broken dreams. Her legs were immobilized beneath white sheets, heavy with metal rods that gleamed coldly in the fluorescent light. Her ribs screamed with every shallow movement, purple bruises blooming across her pale skin like storm clouds. But none of it hurt as much as what came next. A nurse had just left the room, her white sneakers squeaking against the linoleum floor, when Audrey's phone vibrated on the rolling bedside table. The device seemed impossibly far away, but she stretched her trembling arm, wincing as pain shot through. Her shoulder, one new voicemail. Her heart fluttered with desperate hope as she pressed play, expecting words of comfort, promises of rushing to her side. Instead, her mother's voice chirped through the speaker like a cheerful songbird oblivious to the storm it was about to unleash. "Hi, sweetheart. Just wanted to say we're at O'Hare, Maldives. Here we come." The excitement in her voice was infectious, giddy with the promise of azure waters and white sand beaches. "Ethan's tagging along. He needed a break after that startup. Thing fell through. We figured since you're going to be in the hospital for weeks anyway, it was now or never for this kind of trip." Then came her father's gruff voice, cutting through the background chatter of departure gates and rolling suitcases. "Tell her not to call. We don't want to deal with hospital drama while we're trying to relax. This vacation cost us enough already." Her mother's laugh tinkled like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Right, don't call us, honey. International roaming fees are absolutely insane these days. If it's really urgent, you can email the resort concierge. They'll get the message to us eventually. Ciao." There was a rustle of fabric, the sound of someone grabbing the phone. Then Ethan's voice drifted through, cold, sarcastic, sharp as winter. "Wind. Thanks for funding the trip, sis. Try not to die while we're gone, okay? That would really mess up our tan time." The line went dead with a mechanical click that seemed to echo through Audrey's chest cavity. Her hand went completely limp, fingers releasing their grip as if her very bones had turned to water. The phone slid across the rough hospital blanket and landed with a dull thud on the bed. She couldn't breathe. Not because of her injuries, though every inhale felt like fire racing through her chest, her broken ribs grinding against each other, but because the people she had loved most in this world had abandoned her. Not just left her behind, but fled from her pain with her own money, laughing as they boarded their flight to paradise while she lay broken and alone. The weight of realization settled on her chest, heavier than any physical injury. This wasn't some misunderstanding or poor timing. This was deliberate abandonment, orchestrated with precision and funded by her own generosity. She thought of all the times she'd covered their expenses, believing that love meant giving until it hurt, and then giving more. The mortgage payments, the credit card bills, Ethan's failed business ventures, her father's golf club membership, her mother's endless spa retreats and yoga workshops. When she'd finally suggested maybe scaling back her financial support, not stopping entirely, just reducing the flow, they'd called her ungrateful, selfish, a disappointment to the family name. A young nurse named Riley Patterson walked into the room just as the first tears began streaming down Audrey's face, soaking into the stiff hospital pillow. Riley was perhaps 28, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She moved, with the quiet efficiency of someone who had seen too much suffering, but her expression immediately softened when she saw Audrey's distress. "Hey there, what's wrong? Are you in pain? I can adjust your medication." But when Audrey managed to whisper the story between ragged sobs, Riley's professional composure cracked. Her jaw tightened, and she pulled a chair close to the bed, settling. Seemed like she planned to stay a while. Dr. Margaret Lewis, the trauma surgeon, who had reconstructed Audrey's shattered legs with titanium pins and medical miracles, stopped by during evening rounds. She was a woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and hands that had saved countless lives. But even she seemed stunned by the cruelty of Audrey's situation. "I've been working in trauma medicine for 23 years, she said quietly, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. I've seen neglect, I've seen families fall apart under pressure, but this level of calculated abandonment, it's something else entirely. She paused, studying Audrey's chart, then looked directly into her patient's eyes. Your physical recovery is going to take months, but healing from this betrayal might take longer. You're going to need support, and it's clear you can't count on them. But the messages from the Maldives kept coming, each one a fresh knife twist in an already gaping wound. Her phone buzzed constantly with social media notifications that felt like psychological torture delivered in perfectly curated squares. Her mother posing in designer swimwear against crystal blue waters, her smile radiant and carefree captions reading, "Living my absolute best life. Blessed Hermaron vacation. Paradise. Living the dream." Her brother standing shirtless on the deck of a private yacht, arms spread wide to embrace the tropical sunset, bronzed skin glistening with coconut oil. Maldives got me feeling fresh and free, thanks for making this possible universe. The irony wasn't lost on Audrey that her own financial generosity had funded their ability to forget her so completely. Not once did they ask about her condition. Not once did they inquire about her pain levels, her prognosis, whether she was eating, sleeping, or even conscious. They had performed a magic trick, making her disappear from their paradise as completely, as if she had never existed, as if her love and sacrifice had been nothing more than convenient fiction. Audrey's roommate was a woman named Samantha Chen, a 62-year-old retired teacher recovering from hip replacement surgery. Samantha had raised 4 children as a single mother after her husband's death, working double shifts and weekend jobs to keep food on the table and dreams alive. She had weathered financial storms that would have broken lesser souls, but she had never experienced anything quite like what she witnessed in the bed next to hers. During the long, sleepless nights, when Audrey's sobs echoed through the darkened room, Samantha would reach across the space between their beds and squeeze her hand. "Child," she would whisper in her gentle voice worn smooth by years of comforting frightened students, "they don't deserve a single breath of your love, not one tear of your grief. You are worth more than they will ever understand." One sleepless Tuesday night, as Chicago rain drummed against the hospital windows and the city lights blurred through glass streaked with water, Audrey made a discovery that shattered what remained of her faith in her family. She had been checking her bank account on her phone, trying to calculate how long her savings would last during recovery, when she saw the charge. $21,000 to Sunset Paradise Travel Agency, charged to her credit card 2 days after her accident. The transaction timestamp showed it had been processed while she was still unconscious in the ICU, while doctors were still uncertain whether she would walk again. They hadn't just abandoned her in her darkest hour. They had robbed her blind while doing it. The betrayal went deeper than money, though the financial theft was staggering enough to leave her breathless. This was about trust violated at the most fundamental level, about love revealed as transaction, about family ties exposed as chains of exploitation. She remembered being 12 years old, falling off her bicycle in front of their house on Maple Street, her arm twisted at an unnatural angle. Her father hadn't even looked up from his football game, just waved dismissively and said, "You're not bleeding out, stop being such a drama queen." When she won a full scholarship to Northwestern University, graduating summa cum laude with a degree in finance, her mother's only comment had been, "Well, at least now we won't have to pay for your education." That's something, I suppose. Her entire life had been a series of transactions disguised as love payments, extracted under the banner of family obligation. At 25, she was earning 6 figures as a financial analyst, and every penny above. Her modest living expenses went straight to them. She paid their mortgage, their car payments, funded Ethan's endless parade of doomed startups and get-rich-quick schemes. She covered her father's country club membership, her mother's designer shopping sprees, their vacations, to places she had never seen. And when she finally worked up the courage to suggest that maybe possibly she could reduce her contributions, just slightly, not eliminate them, just scale back so she could start building her own future, they had exploded with righteous indignation. With Riley's help, the nurse who had become her anchor in the storm, staying past her shifts to sit with Audrey during the worst moments, she began the painful process of untangling the financial chains that had bound her to her family for so long. They cancelled credit cards, froze accounts, and stopped automatic transfers. Riley helped her navigate the bank's fraud department, documenting the unauthorized charges. Most satisfying of all, they cancelled the family's return flight tickets, leaving them stranded in paradise, with empty pockets and no way home, except their own resourcefulness. When her family finally returned to Chicago 3 weeks later, broke, sunburned, and furious beyond measure, they burst into her hospital room like a tropical storm making landfall. Her father's face was brick red with anger and too much sun, his receding hairline peeling from UV exposure. Her mother's usually perfect hair was still braided with tiny shells from some expensive spa treatment, and she clutched a designer beach bag that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Ethan wore a silk shirt, half unbuttoned, to show off his vacation tan, but his eyes were hard with barely contained rage. "What the hell did you think you were doing?" her father barked, his voice echoing off the sterile walls. "Do you have any idea what you put us through? The humiliation at that resort when our cards were declined?" Her mother's voice rose to match his volume, shrill with indignation. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone. The concierge made us pay cash for everything. After that, Ethan had to sell his phone just to afford meals." But Audrey didn't flinch this time. Something fundamental had shifted during those weeks of abandonment and reflection. She sat up straighter in her hospital bed, her spine finding strength it had never possessed before. "I stopped paying to be abandoned," she said, her voice calm and clear as morning lake water. "I stopped funding my own neglect." The confrontation that followed was brutal, but necessary, like setting a badly healed bone so it could mend properly. They accused her of betrayal, of being selfish and ungrateful, of destroying the family. She listened to their rage with new ears, hearing the manipulation tactics that had controlled her for years. When they finally exhausted their fury, she handed them a manila folder containing a contract she had drafted with help from the hospital's social services department. One final payment to help them get back on their feet, therapy requirements, and a complete cessation of financial support moving forward. They scoffed, called her bluffing, and stormed out in a whirlwind of expensive perfume and wounded pride. And for the first time in her adult life, Audrey didn't cry after they left. She didn't chase after them with apologies and promises to do better. She sat in the quiet hospital room, listening to the steady beep of her monitors and the distant sound of Chicago traffic, and felt something she had never experienced before: peace. The kind of deep, bone-settling peace that comes from finally telling the truth and accepting its consequences. Riley had been working double shifts to stay close during Audrey's recovery, and their professional relationship had gradually transformed into something deeper and more meaningful. What started as compassionate care became genuine friendship, and then slowly blossomed into love. Riley understood what it meant to rebuild from nothing. She had put herself through nursing school after aging out of the foster care system, creating her own family from chosen connections rather than biological obligations. She saw strength in Audrey that Audrey was only beginning to recognize in herself. Months later, Audrey walked again, not just the mechanical act of placing one foot in front of the other, but the metaphorical journey from victim to survivor to someone who chose her own path. She laughed again, real laughter that came from joy rather than obligation. She built a new life with Riley, smaller and simpler than the one she had funded before, but infinitely richer in the ways that mattered. They found a modest apartment in Lincoln Park, adopted a rescue dog named Hope, and created traditions that honored authenticity over appearance. 1 year after the accident that had shattered her body and her illusions, Audrey stood in their small living room surrounded by friends who had chosen to be there. Riley was beside her, holding her hand as they raised glasses of sparkling cider in a toast to survival and growth. The autumn light streaming through their windows painted everything golden, and Chicago hummed with life beyond their walls. "My body healed slower than my heart," Audrey said, her voice strong and clear. "But both grew back stronger than before. I may have lost a family, but I found myself, and sometimes that's the only trade worth making." The room filled with warmth and laughter, the sound of genuine love freely given and freely received. Outside, the city continued its ancient rhythm, and Audrey knew she was finally truly home. Congratulations, type 7 in the comments, so I know. You stayed with me until the end. Leave a like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. See you.